Hey everybody, checking in with a little bit more content from the content mines after a crazy few weeks in domestic U.S. and international politics. I've really been thinking a lot about, like most of us have, I think, Biden's transition out of the presidential race and Kamala Harris's sort of stepping into the fold here and really kind of sweeping the whole process by storm. And obviously, a lot of that comes down to her personal charisma and her personal. I say that sort of in a Max Weber kind of sense. I don't think she's charismatic in the way that maybe Barack Obama is, but she has her own kind of charisma, and I don't want to downplay that at all. But I've been thinking also about just sort of structurally what kind of takeaways can we have about this decision that was sort of forced in some ways upon the Democrats, given Biden's debate performance and some other kind of more broad campaign issues that sort of forced this all to happen last minute. Kind of what we could take away from that, how might that apply to U.S. elections more broadly, perhaps elections in the international system more broadly, and sort of how this kind of late decision to change who is the front runner for a party, kind of what kind of ramifications does that have on electoral politics? And really, what stuck out to me most strongly is, even though it was initially obviously proposed as a complete disaster for the Democrats and would really signal the end of any kind of successful campaign against Donald Trump, quite obviously the opposite has in fact happened. And what's really interesting about that to me is kind of what it says more broadly about U.S. politics. Obviously, there's this refrain or this sort of trope in American politics that there's a kind of a liberal media, liberal dominated media. But when you sort of break that down and look at the social science, there have been folks for many years. The study I have in front of me is by Martin and McCrane, who are at business schools, basically Stanford and Emory business schools, saying the U.S. media environment is increasingly consolidated, sort of like our banking environment, and lots of other environments we have. Lack of regulation, lack of antitrust, kind of allows a lot of consolidation. And what they've found, and this is one of many studies that has found this, is that consolidation leads to slightly less popularity for those news products, but also quite a bit of right-wing skew for how issues are covered. And so they specifically look at Sinclair Media Group, and they look at how the consolidation of all these local news stations and print media stations and advertising stations leads to sort of a right-wing skew, in particular with Sinclair, but they've noted this with other parts of the news environment as well. I think most of us remember that viral video that kind of blew up a few years ago with a bunch of Sinclair Media talking heads and pundits kind of saying the same boilerplate line about, I believe it was about social unrest, over and over again across the country. Right, this is sort of the consolidation and the rightward shifting of the narrative that these scholars have noticed. Obviously, in traditional media, you have things like Nielsen ratings, and in this regard, Fox News has been dominant for many years. Pete Buttigieg recently made an interesting point that he goes on Fox partly to talk to people who are sort of subjected to Fox News, kind of because it's what's on. Obviously, I mean, it's on at my gym. It's been on actually in the foyers of office buildings that I've worked at. I've talked to plenty of folks in the military and other places where this is sort of put on for them, and they don't really have a choice to change it. But obviously, Fox News is also just popular on its own merits. But certainly there's a dominance there in traditional sort of cable news media of right-wing voices. Again, in part thanks to this consolidation. You can move over to the AM dial, right? I think some 90+% of AM talk radio is conservative in nature, and this obviously for younger folks or more digital folks, doesn't seem that important. But really, this is something that for a lot of working people who are in their cars all day driving around, this is what's on, right? So this really inundates folks with right-wing narratives, and obviously that commodification, that centralization of the AM radio dial is also a part of this rightward shift of news. And then on the flip side, right, some of the more postmodern, modern kind of media sources, digital social media companies like Twitter. Obviously, there have been a ton of events lately with Elon Musk taking over Twitter. So that's all to say, there's a lot of evidence that points to this narrative about, a liberal media, a liberal-dominated media, being actually pretty inaccurate, at least when it comes to what we would think about as traditional news sources in the United States. Why do we care, Dan? Okay, we get it. Like, you've made this point. Well, why does this matter? Well, with Kamala Harris's kind of ascension to the Democratic Party nominee for the presidency, I've been thinking a lot about how this compares to other events in the past. And I think my sort of thesis here really is it actually kind of behooves you, if you are in an environment where the media environment is so dominated by the sort of opposing ideological side of the spectrum, this kind of holding off until the last minute to push a nominee really has a lot of advantages, because it prevents your opposition from using really their intense control, their intense centralization of media across all these different platforms, all these different media modalities. That's really prevented from being as effective because you're just shortening the campaign so much, right? And you're preventing folks on the opposition side to kind of paint a narrative of you and define you how they might want to, right? And this has really been, I think, among some of the more savvy media kind of policy wonks. There's been this discussion around like who gets to define Kamala Harris, because nobody knows. Obviously, people who are really invested in this stuff know who she is and kind of know her deal, know what policy she has worked to promote. But a lot of people don't, right? She has been sort of in the background of the Biden-Harris administration. So there's a sort of race to be able to define this person, and really partly because of the intense and immediate consolidation within the Democratic Party around her as a candidate. Obviously, that's given the Democrats a lot of strength there, and that's one side of the story. But I think the other side of the story is just sort of the scrambling on the right-wing media side to sort of how do we define this person and what are her weaknesses in an environment where your mass media across all these different domains is so dominated by the opposition kind of ideology in a two-party system. It might really behoove you. It might really be a good idea to kind of put forward this broad range of best athletes, of people who are really at the top of the, your Tim Walz's, your Pete Buttigieg's, your Governor Shapiro's, these types of folks, your Gretchen Whitmer's, really getting all those folks out and doing that later in the process, keeping the excitement, keeping those ideas kind of churning. I mean, who knows how replicable this is, right? I think the problem with that is, in general, those kind of contestations become very, there's a lot of infighting, there's a lot of people jockeying for position, but I wonder, how durable and how portable this solution is when, at least for the time being, the Democrats really don't have, and skip me with the, well, they have MSNBC or whatever. It just doesn't work that way, right? The viewership just isn't there. The consolidation really just isn't there. So there's not really an alternative. Obviously, the progressives in the United States have their Pod Save Americas, or their Chapo trap houses or whatever. But those sources just are not, Vox Media just is not competitive with Fox News. So in an environment where you have to just sort of concede that the opposition has quite a bit more media consolidation, quite a bit more focus and control in terms of local media, digital media, I guess I'm sort of wondering why try to compete, right? I think what this election cycle has shown us is, I mean, frankly, this is totally in line with how people traditionally think about, elections, that people don't really, the vast majority of people really don't tune in to the electoral process in the United States until after, what is it, Labor Day? Is that sort of the traditional logic behind this stuff, right? So I guess I'm wondering a little bit if that's true, right? And the only people that are really watching, tuning into the sort of inter-party fight for who the nominee is are already going to be obviously involved in party politics, are already going to have made their decision. Really, you're trying to win over those swing voters, those undecided voters, and that's all going to happen, starting sometime in August or maybe September, right, where this stuff really starts to kick off. If that's the case, don't give the opposition, with their super consolidated media environment, the time to spend months, if not years. In the case of Hillary Clinton, it was really years of indoctrination, of constant pounding of these narratives about her qualifications and about all the downsides, or sort of fictitious downsides to her candidacy. that really just built up, I think, a kind of a paradigm, right? A sort of a flavor to her that she really was never able to move away from. She was never really able to re-seize that narrative, and that really doomed her campaign. So again, not quite sure how durable or portable this would be as a strategy, but it's something worth thinking about, something worth contemplating as we always talk about election fatigue in the United States, and we always look at campaigns in France or the United Kingdom, sort of admiringly covetously look at them and wish we could have a 2-week or a 1-month long election campaign. Well, why can't we? Especially if it actually positions you to really have this acute period of excitement within the party and within sort of swing voters for your candidacy, as for the candidate you put forward. Obviously, there's a lot of other factors at play here in terms of the Democrats' ability to sort of unify around Kamala Harris. But yeah, something to think about, and really would be curious for y'all's thoughts about the strategy and how it might apply in other races going forward. As usual, thanks for watching, and looking forward to reading your comments.